The first bustle period, so roughly speaking the early years of the 1870s, is perhaps one of the most complicated, decorative and consciously theatrical styles of the 19th century. If we look at the fashion plates and the surviving clothes from this period, you have a lot of decoration. Everything that can be decorated is decorated for the reasons I already mentioned. So to show off class and wealth. So of course all the rules of appropriateness apply. So you would have more sensible, shorter length of skirts during the day. And lighter colors and longer skirts, longer trains in the evening. But the rules of appropriateness, of course, are overlaid with the rules of the style. So what we have is the very visible bustle, so this projection at the back of the skirt, which could be arranged differently, which could be arranged over a separate dress improver, so the tournure or the bustle could be worn as piece of an underwear, or it could be integrated into the skirt itself. It really depends on the individual models, items. We have everything that started to appear in the previous style. That is, for example, the great popularity of artificial dyes, and whenever a new color was developed by the chemical industry, it immediately became very fashionable. These were usually bright colors, and especially during the day, the clothes tend to be colorful. A new thing is that this silhouette is perhaps the first serious change from the Romantic period. So throughout the Romantic period and throughout the Victorian, mid-Victorian period, the general assumption was that a woman had to have a, hourglass figure with a rounded full skirt. This time is the first time now in the bustle period that the fullness is arranged differently, with the front of the garment being relatively narrow and close to the body. This was still quite uncomfortable, perhaps psychologically, to many women. So especially in the first bustle period, we have quite a lot of decoration at the front of the skirt itself, in the forms of draperies, the so-called apron fronts, so the kind of arrangement that resembles an apron. Basically something happens at the front of the garment as well, so not only the back but the front as well. The sleeves are also very heavily decorated. We have all kinds of arrangements going back to historical styles, so the puffs and the slits and the clothes that are inspired by medieval art and Renaissance and any kind of historical inspiration. I already mentioned the 18th century. So the decoration of the skirts with the so-called tablier, so kind of flat curtain style arrangements, the layering, the overdresses and underskirts, they become very, very popular. Anything that adds to the decorativeness, that requires more stitching, that requires more craftsmanship, is very much promoted. This is definitely not the kind of costume that could be worn for any kind of work. Even I would say for let's say more formal occasions by poorer women. So the clothes worn by the high society and the masses really take separate roads, because the masses are not able to follow the fashion as closely, because it's so expensive, complicated and changing so fast. Bonnets are still worn, but they are smaller and they are gradually replaced by hats. Generally in the bustle period, the hats replace bonnets as the let's say default female headwear. The popularity of the chignon added to the speed of this change, because there was this big bulge at the back of the head. So either the bonnet had to be very small with some sort of opening at the back to accommodate the chignon, or they would be replaced by small hats, increasingly tilted to the front of the head. So the back of the head with the big chignon would be left undisturbed, and the headwear would be worn basically at the front of the head, sometimes overlaying the forehead a little or partially. Next thing, flounces, still popular, they never went out of fashion. The new thing that's really becoming popular and especially visible in day dresses, although not always, are the pleats, the pleated skirts, the pleated decorations. It means special kind of narrow vertical flounces that are mechanically made. You needed a special machine, a kind of machine using steam and heat and weight to change the shape of the fabric permanently before it's made into a skirt. So we have those small vertical pleats, very popular in dresses, very popular during the day with walking dresses, and in the evening either as a layer, let's say, as a decoration, or as the underskirt, let's say. So here we have a specimen from Victoria and Albert Museum of what looks to be a costume for a mature woman, a day costume with the pronounced bustle and the bodice or a kind of jacket worn even partially over the bustle with a small bonnet. So rather conservative, but if you look at the decoration of the skirt, you see it's very modern. So this layering, the horizontal pleats and the ruching, so this kind of three-dimensionality appears again. This is quite popular, especially for day clothes. For evening clothes, the first bustle period is as extravagant and as complicated as it can get. The dresses very often have trains. More often than not, the evening dresses have trains. They might have those historical elements, especially in the decoration or the sleeves or the collars, or they might use just a lot of fabric in forms of draperies and overlay, and basically the skirt itself would be huge, plus extended into the train. Live flowers or artificial flowers appear in great numbers. Also decorations made of ribbon and lace and just everything, lots of jewelry. If you had the money, you would really display it in the evening. With those long, full skirts, the hair is also worn long and full at the back. So the chignon and other forms of very elaborate arrangements using longer hair. Long hair is very typical, but not completely loose hair. It's not loose. It's always arranged and styled. In the Bustle period, it's no longer connected with childhood, something that only young girls would wear. We have different styles of trains. A very popular one was called the fan dress, with the train kind of extending into a kind of fan shape at the back. Sometimes it would require special supports, so the shape would not be changed, yeah, this is one of the most elaborate, theatrical, sometimes people say nonsensical and silly fashions, combining, as I said already, the modern way of thinking in an urban society with more movement of women, even fashionable rich women going into the city, I don't know, to shop, to enjoy social occasions, to visit cafes and restaurants, to meet with friends. But at the same time, it's one of the most conventionally, traditionally feminine styles, with the very strong association of femininity, especially wealthy femininity, with decoration and this kind of even overdressing, if you think about that. So the elongated styles, the elongated train with the elongated hairstyle. For Dewa, as I already mentioned, the trains were not so popular. They sometimes were worn, especially by hostesses who would entertain at home, or who would use private carriages to move around the city, so they wouldn't really walk in the streets. For walking, they would be wearing shorter dresses, and definitely dresses without the trains. Another very important innovation, which starts in the Bustle period, is that the bodice itself and the corset beneath it become very long. So the Bustle style bodice is sometimes called the Kiras bodice. It's apparently taken from the military language, part of the uniform that was covering the upper body and was very tight, and it was also long. It was down to the level of the hips, so definitely below the waist. So the bodice in this period is elongated as well. It does not end at the level of the waist, it extends lower. So sometimes it goes down to the level of the hips, and sometimes even so much as to interfere with the movement. This is something that will remain part of the fashion even when the bustle goes out of fashion for the first time. So the princess dress or the natural form dress will very often keep this very long bodice, so that there will be this very elongated line, especially visible at the back. So like a smooth flowing line, sometimes going from the shoulders to the end of a train. The princess dresses especially have trains very often, sometimes decorated, but the decorations start at the level of the hips and below, not at the level of the back of the waist, so the buttocks really, but below the hips, below the buttocks, at the level of the thighs maybe, or even sometimes knees. So this is something that's quite important. Not all women liked the bustle. Some liked those princess dresses better. And by the middle of the 70s, the princess dress started to be more visible than the bustle, although some fashion plates and some specimens still show the bustle dresses. But in the early 80s, really, there is a moment when the bustle goes out of fashion. So a few more plates. Note the colored fabrics, sometimes in coordinated colors, so you might have different shades of the same color, or perhaps the plain and decorated fabrics or patterned fabrics. All kinds of checks and tartans are still popular for day dresses. You might have contrasting colors, like this very spectacular dress in red and black, with what looks really as like a kind of quilting of the skirt, so kind of three-dimensional volume thing. So as you can see, some of these dresses have the bustles. A specimen from 1878 with a polonaise, so the long bodice with the attached overskirt, is also supported on a bustle, so a fashionable day dress with a train, so probably rather for home use. But around that time, around the second half of the 70s, you start having the princess dresses more and more, sometimes with just a kind of long flowing line, sometimes with some decoration at the lower part of the hips. Big bows, broad sashes are popular, and also the layering, the flouncing, but almost exclusively at the back. Note the bodices that continue to be very long. Sometimes they have the vertical decorations, like inserts made of different fabrics in contrasting colors, to create a kind of optical illusion of even more elongated, narrow, slim figure. This is what happens in the later 70s, and it will really dominate in the 80s, especially in day wear. In the evening, you still sometimes get the bustle dresses like this one here in this kind of peach color with very interesting broad pleating at the level of the skirt. But on the next fashion plate you see a kind of light green dress in the princess style with a very narrow skirts. Those skirts in this period between the first and second bustle get very narrow sometimes. That is why for the late Victorians, this was the reminiscence of the neoclassical style, but of course worn with a corset. The last plate in this section shows the headwear, the fashionable headwear of 1878. So you still have some bonnets. The blue one is a bonnet, the red one is a bonnet. I would say only the one in the middle is a hat, is a small hat, like a very small top hat with a rather high crown and a moderate brim, decorated with some flower, artificial flower, so it doesn't look masculine. But the fact that it is set in the middle really points to the fact that this is the most fashionable version, and that the bonnets will quickly go out of fashion. And we continue in a moment.